Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're excited to get rocking and rolling. You've got Gabe Larson here. I am the director of Inside Sales Labs. That is our best practice and research group here at InsideSales.com. And today we are going to be talking about developing a gamification strategy. We're going to keep this high level. We're going to go more into best practices, some things we've found successful with clients, and then next week we're going to be following it up with a little more tactical stuff about how you build it and how you get into our Power Standings product. So as we jump in, I want to know who's here, who's part of the webinar today. So if you can, grab your Q&A box. It's down there at the bottom, and tell me your name and where you're coming from. Because, boy, I want to make this as interactive as possible and see if we can answer some of your questions about developing gamification strategies. Fantastic. Looks like we got a couple people on the Q&A box put their name in. We've got Robert, Desiree, Philip, Peter. Fantastic, you guys. Appreciate you jumping on. Again, use that Q&A box to answer any questions you might have as we go through this. Kevin, thanks for joining. Okay, let's dive in and talk gamification. So, high-level gamification, what is it? Well, gamification to us is the application of game principles and design to sales to improve rep motivation to really get people up and going. Now, we're going to be talking about why gamification works, why it fails, a couple strategies behind execution, and some sample games that might be helpful. And again, want to make this as interactive as possible. So again, the definition here is the application of game principles and design to sales to improve rep motivation and productivity. Why does gamification really work? Well, it works because it does three main things. It improves the sales process by engaging reps, providing visibility to reps and managers, and then getting to that cultural piece, creating a culture where people can effectively be part of your organization and be engaged as part of it. Now, want to dive into each of these areas. This is a stat from Gallup Consulting. If you haven't heard of them, they run the poll, presidential poll, etc. But they've been tracking employee engagement for years, and they do it both nationally and internationally. And currently, their statement is that only 33% of employees are engaged at work. That leaves a large number of employees being disengaged at work. One of the reasons is creating this culture where games can be part of driving rep motivation. We'll get into that in just a second. So again, that's engagement. Let's talk a little bit about visibility. This is a source you see here, 3 times increase in productivity when reps are actually able to view, to have visibility into what's actually going on around what they are doing, KPI, metrics, etc. Next, last one here is this concept of culture, and this is comes from an HBR article. 87% of employees feel a strong relationship with their manager when their team has a culture of praise. That manager, you guys, that is so important. When we think about feedback, one of the things I like to always focus on is that 3-to-1 concept. If you're going to provide feedback, if you're going to be working with different people, you want to go 3-to-1. 3 positives and one opportunity, that kind of feedback and culture of praise can really help you move forward with not only your relationship, but a culture of productivity. So, again, why does gamification work? Those three areas. It's about engagement, getting people involved, getting visibility to what actually is going on, and then creating this culture where success can happen effectively. When you nail this, and we've done this with a lot of our customers, you guys, this is one I'm pulling out specifically. It's a recent inside sales customer. We got him on a gamification strategy, and again, gamification strategy, you got to get on the why, you got to get on the what, and you need the how. But we saw an increase on connect rate. Those are conversations, on activities, as well as appointments. And those are some big numbers just by doubling down and really focusing on how can we build a gamification strategy that does work. So if that's what works, well, what actually fails? So some of the things that actually cause the gamification strategy to fail are lack of strategy, inconsistency, and lack of empathy. So the strategy is, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but you've got to know one of the key concepts of motivation is the idea of scorekeeping. People need to know why they're winning. So when it comes to game design, people need to be able to answer the simple question of, how do I win? No one likes to be measured, but everybody likes to keep score. And it's a very important part of strategy to get that piece right. Consistency is number 2. And this is, guys, I always like to say, a weight scale doesn't actually help you lose weight. You've got to find a way to build a program, an exercise program, a fitness program, and then the weight scale becomes an important part of that program. But the two together really are the key. Same thing with gamification. A tool is fantastic and can really help you drive your program. But if you don't have a structure to consistently drive activities, games, challenges, etc., you're going to run into problems. And lastly, that lack of empathy. If you don't get creative on the personalization of games and how you're driving the different challenges that you build or achievements, it becomes dry, it becomes boring, and it loses the flair that I think it needs or requires to have those reps stay involved. So let's get into a couple more things here. Specifically, I want to talk about the strategy that you need to be having, some of the keys to success to really get in and do this the right way. I touched on this briefly, but there is a why concept. So as we think about motivational factors and why people do what they do, there is this concept of personal choice. No one likes to be told exactly what to do. If we appreciate people, we will give them the why. We will talk to them about why we're actually setting up these different strategies so that they will actually choose to buy in. Do not run gamification strategies where you just force people and say you have to do X. It's way better to say, we want you to do, this is why we want you to do this, and then this is how you actually do it. So transparency is going to be important. You want to make sure that things are fair, and you want to make sure that the games actually align to the higher purpose, which is making the company as well as the rep money. Now, point number 2 here. You want to reinforce the right behaviors, and I always like to see a build-up here. So normally when you start a gamification strategy, you want to start with just getting people potentially adoption, so having fun and getting involved. Next, you want to move into, you often follow that funnel model. Start with activities, move to talk time, get to opportunities, then go to close deals. So think about going leading and lagging indicators, but remember, you're looking to drive behaviors that actually get what you want, which is, ultimately more money for the company, more sales, more revenue. So it becomes extremely important. The thing you're going to want to be thinking about as well is this concept of a point structure. And we'll be talking about creating optimal point structures in future webinars. But the points can really drive the right behaviors that you want. So don't just throw in random points. Think about how activities align with conversations and conversations align with opportunities, and think about proper weighting there. And then last but not least, again, remember that end goal. It becomes extremely important to keep your eye on the prize, and remember that gamification works best with leading indicators, things that lead to being able to potentially close more deals or make more money. This one becomes extremely important. I am a big believer in gamification strategies that have calendars, that have deadlines. So if you haven't created this yet, you should have a gamification calendar. That's a once a month meeting where you sit down with a little committee and you talk about what are the activities, challenges, power hours, games that we want to deploy this month in order to properly run our gamification strategy. So a calendar becomes extremely important. We've just put a sample up here. You can get very detailed on this, a little less detailed, but this helps the consistency. It gives a visibility into the group as to what's going on. And then you've got that committee who can actually help you enact or execute on some of the things that you want to bring to fruition. Next, so thinking through this differentiation is going to be important. So if you just run the same things over and over, and this gets a little bit difficult. This is where that calendar becomes important. If you're just going to run the same games every week, then I mean, people need variety. We need things to change, and so we would expect. And we've got some sample games we're going to be going over today. In future webinars, we're going to be diving into more sample activities. But you make it fun. Think out of the box. Think out of the box when it comes to the games or the rewards. But each time you run games, try not to make them the exact same, or you'll get that. You'll start to see people kind of disengage or pull out of it. One of the key things about games is making them more personalized. So you've got to find things that are interesting to sales reps. So right now it's the NBA finals in basketball. You maybe make a game around that if you've got a floor of people who are interested in sport. I've seen other ideas around sports that March Madness, the NCAA basketball stuff. Other things are restaurants that are in the area where people really like to go, or movies. Maybe a movie's coming out and you're giving free tickets to a movie. Finding what's interesting to your sales reps and then building the reward program, the games around that, obviously gets them bought in. If they never find the games interesting because the rewards never apply to them, then you're going to be in a bad place. This is one that it gets really interesting, and we've actually got a couple questions. I got to make sure I watch this Q&A. Karen's asked a great question about what's more powerful. Is it best to have managers create games, or how do you get reps involved in creating games? And I'm going to see if I can answer this maybe a little different than you were expecting, Karen. But when it comes to games, what we've found is absolutely do you want people to have managers actually say, hey, let's create games that are effective for our sales team. But on the other side of it, you want to get reps actually driving some of this as well. So Karen, you've got a couple options. Within the Power Standings product, you actually have that idea of throwdowns where you can have rep-initiated challenges. It's so much more effective to have it be initiated from reps. The next level up on that is to get that committee, right? Get somebody, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but get a designated team lead or a super user to be your champion on creating games. Make it come from the rep. And that rep can then push other reps to get involved in some of your challenges. And then lastly, certainly you want manager challenges or top-down approaches that can be effective. So I'm a big believer in getting reps involved in the actual games themselves, both from the rewards as well as actually the creation of it, because it makes it fairly effective. Appreciate that question, Karen. So when it comes to this idea, you want to get, and I think it's a good dovetail to what Karen was asking, it's around how should we get other things involved, and making it doing a whole team goal can be a fun thing. So that's more of an achievement. Whoever can hit, this total number of sales revenue, maybe the whole, whoever hits that gets potentially an award. Maybe make a team challenge. If the whole team, reaches this goal, then potentially the whole team gets a reward. So you can do team, individual achievements. You can pit each other against each other. So I like thinking creatively about some of your different options around being creative on the game structure. This goes to the feedback concept, and we talked about it a little bit at first. Recognition is fantastic. In inside sales, we use the gong to kind of, if someone closes a big deal, you're going to see people line up around the gong. We've got a neighboring company here, Domo, that has, I should have included it. And I'm bringing this up. So we got Jamie asked a question about what are some good examples of recognizing people with games. And we talked about some, Jamie, around doing, movie tickets, restaurants that people like, gift cards to Amazon, sometimes just more generic stuff, coffee card, gift card. Those are always fun things to kind of throw in there. Time off, so, leaving the office maybe a little earlier on Friday. But I was going to mention one, Jamie, that I thought you'd appreciate, and that is our friends at Domo, and you can see this online. They've got this blue rooster, and the person who closes the most that month, gets to have this this really big rooster that sits near their cubicle. If you hit me up on LinkedIn, I'll make sure I send you a picture. But again, you try to get to this creativity that can be extremely fun, but the idea is recognizing. And when it comes to recognition, the person who's giving the recognition shouldn't decide on how much. That should really be decided from the people receiving the recognition. So you got to be careful about public and private. I am a big believer in public recognition, especially when it comes to sales. But some people don't like that, so be cautious of that. So again, get creative on that. Email can be very effective here. So you announce winners on emails, or you make sure that you have senior leaders jump in and actually share some of the, hey, the SVP of sales actually jumps in, hey, John, congratulations on winning this month's challenge or this week's challenge. Getting that type of recognition can be extremely effective in these types of programs. The Power Hour is just a no-brainer. I can't think. I'm thinking of some of our team who've done a lot of implementations. I think, Amanda, you're out there. We got a couple other people on our side. The Power Hours, it's just a no-brainer. These are things that you should be probably doing daily. It's just a great game. You can put points, you can put challenges behind it, you can do different rewards. Making sure that you use this type of game can be very effective. Now, you do, when you create a game around Power Hours, you want to make sure a couple things. One is it is around optimal times. Now, you can find that using data within the InsideSales.com system. So let's not do a Power Hour. I was at a company down in Southern California, and we saw a significant difference by just randomly doing a Power Hour and then doing a Power Hour when we're basically having the most conversations during the day. The big problem with Power Hours is if you don't keep it sacred, nobody will. And so making sure it's on the calendar, that people don't actually, if you allow a couple reps not to do it each day, then everybody starts not to do it. So doing that, and I am a believer in the morning. That usually lines up with our general data, and most of the clients I've run this data with, earlier the better. You want to get in and get it going sooner rather than later. Waiting till the afternoon eliminates the ability to get people to call you back, and your energy drops often in the afternoon as well. Continuing on here, I've got a couple questions, guys. I'll get to those in just a minute. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but this is getting reps involved in the actual formulation of the gamification strategy, and making sure that they feel comfortable with not only the rewards, but with some of the games that are actually being done. So I've seen a lot of organizations create, again, it's not it's not an official role. Consider this kind of a special role that you would actually have, that a rep or again a team lead is designated each month to kind of be the chair and come up with some of these types of things, so that we can make sure that we effectively manage the calendar, throughout the entire process. Now, I'm getting a lot of questions. We've got Gene, Tim, Phil. They're all asking a lot of questions about optimal gifts, or what are some other gifts you can use. Again, I want to go into this a little bit more into future webinars, because I usually break gifts into 4 categories: monetary gifts, experiential gifts, fun or punishment gifts, and then variable gifts. So let me just give you one from each category, and maybe this will satisfy you for the moment, then we'll get more into this a little bit later. So monetary, think company swag, think gift cards. For experiential, I love the experiential one, you guys, and that's going to be, lunch with leaders, or we're all going to a movie as an example. The fun and the punishment one, you guys, can be pretty fun. That may be like a dunk tank idea. So if someone loses the competition, again, you got to watch this for your culture, because you got to be a little bit careful. But you can have some fun punishment ones, like if you didn't reach this milestone, then you're set up for the dunk tank. Some fun ones could be, I've seen people say, hey, the winner has somebody, has somebody else wash their car. That's kind of a fun one I've seen. Some of the variable ones are a spin the wheel type of concept. So, if you actually get into the pool of winners, you can spin the wheel for a potential chance, or you do a lottery. Those will be some of the variable ones. But again, we'll get more into this in future webinars. But I wanted to answer, I know I had 4 or 5 people saying, always struggling finding some fun gifts. Maybe those are some you can kind of put in your back pocket there. Let's keep going. Okay, so let's now think. So that's some of the just best practices around strategy of a gamification. I want to get into some of the executional elements that we've found to be effective when actually driving this type of strategy. And a couple questions coming in. I'll get to those because I think they'll fit in around the execution stuff. So we talked about this a little bit, but if you don't keep things sacred, then people won't. So it's often great to, certainly on the power hours, get that in your calendar. But email can be extremely effective here. So I've got this question. Who was it? Let me just find it here. Mary. Mary talked about how much do you rely on just the systems to do gamification, and again, we talked about that before. A weight scale doesn't necessarily help you lose weight. It's very vital in any kind of exercise program, but it's one of the tools. So, Mary, I would look to multiple tools. Certainly power standings is going to be extremely effective at doing feedback and visibility, but a big believer in using email. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute. Use email, send reminders, put it in people's calendars. Use your one-on-one coaching sessions to also recognize and bring up and reinforce some of this stuff. Use a calendar and make sure that's posted on a general SharePoint site where people have access to some of the up-and-coming things that are going on with the team. You want to get all the tools involved, Mary, that I think you can in order to make this program as effective as possible. Good question there. So block out time, send email reminders. The system inherently is going to send people, when kind of where they are currently in the process. But again, I'm a believer. I love when people will say, hey, we're in the middle, so we're doing a power hour. We're 30 minutes in. This is kind of where everybody is, and you can kind of get some fun discussion on your Slack channel or in the email as people. It gets sometimes a little bit disturbing because they're supposed to be, they're supposed to be doing their power hour. They're supposed to be in the middle of the challenge, but kind of a reminder or a discussion that if you get going and people can kind of talk a little bit of smack, can also be a little bit fun. You don't want it to get too out of hand. But again, to Mary's question, using different tools to make sure that people are getting that visibility and getting the reminders can be very, very effective. In addition, certainly if you don't have it already, putting this stuff up on TV screens is very effective. Getting these dashboards visible so that people can just look up and see where they are. They'll see that in their standings bar as well. But you also, again, want to utilize these dashboards. Send them out in emails. Put them in your Slack channel. It's a great way for people inherently throughout the progress of the game to know where they stand. Getting leaders involved through these communication channels can be extremely effective. This is that experiential idea. If you can get VPs or directors to chime in on some of these communications on the Slack channel or on email, the reps that are winning or doing good, they know that it's important. They see that there's buy-in from leadership, but they also get that recognition that things can be pretty important. Dawn just asked the question, how do you get senior leaders to buy in to do some of the things you're talking about here, Gabe? So I think the way to best do that is, number one, it's always about showing leaders what means most for them. So you saw the slide I presented a little bit earlier where one of our clients, we actually ran, and saw that gamification can actually help you improve your activities, your metrics, your numbers, etc. So that's number one. You want leader buy-in. You get them bought in that this can affect sales and some of those big important numbers. Number two, a lot of times it's just about communication. We operate so much in silos that I feel like sometimes we forget or don't realize that they just may not see some of the stuff. So literally walking up to a leader and saying, hey, we're running a challenge this week. I'm going to text you or let you know when we're in halftime, and I'd like you to jump in and kind of do some praise, some recognition. You got to help them help you. And I know it's an additional burden to a manager or, again, a team lead, but it can be a pretty powerful step. Appreciate the question. This praise, again, you just can't do enough praise. So whatever you can do to find people, to get them and make sure they feel comfortable and confident, you're going to see big improvement in adoption of these programs, etc. So we're getting closer to the end here. Wanted to talk about a couple sample activities, spiffs, etc., that we've found to be effective, and then we'll certainly be diving into this more a little bit later. But let's dive into it for the moment now. So this one's a fun one. Again, it aligns with what reps actually like or don't like. So Starbucks is something that most people can align around. So this is the no Starbucks game. So because a rep said that Starbucks wasn't authenticity hipster, they made a game where the loser had to buy Starbucks for them. So again, you kind of pit the winners and losers against each other, and the loser ends up buying a coffee card or somebody's coffee the next day. That's been a fun one. This one's pretty interesting, especially for sales development. You find a great reward, and it's about pipeline. So sales development with the most opportunities earned a desk plant or the pipeline grower distinction. So you use some funny stuff. This is like the Domo Rooster. This guy grew the most pipeline this month. Again, the more creative, the better on this. But this was kind of a fun idea. Couple more for you here. The gift card, the Amazon gift card, can always be super effective. It's the person with the highest call volume for the week or the month or for some specific activity. They get a designated gift card. The great thing about the Amazon is obviously people can use it for their own discretion. I like this one because it's nice and generic and people can use it for their own discretion, but obviously it lacks some of the personalization, of the creativity. Again, that can be difficult to always come up with new stuff. And so you gotta go with what you have. But the Amazon gift card can be a pretty effective one as well. And then lastly here, this Mario Kart one is kind of funny, right? So the team earns points throughout the day, and then they wager them at the end of the day over a game of Mario Kart. So you actually include some other games. You may have some sort of system that you can play off. That can be a fun one. Again, when it comes to games, it's about sitting down and thinking through what is personalized, what will drive adoption, what will get people engaged. Great way to start with that is with new hires. That's a place where you can really establish some best practice, establish what you're doing and what they're doing. So, if you can get new reps to start hitting goals and giving them some sort of reward, that can be pretty effective. We threw kind of a quick example down there at the bottom. So there you have it. That's some high-level thought strategies, best practices on games. I want to open it up here and see if we can do a few minutes of questions to see if there's any specific things around building a gamification strategy that might be on your mind, something that you're feeling like you've had questions about, something that you potentially want to ask. So I'll open it up. We've got a couple people coming in here. Let me just see if we can get to, just go to that Q&A box, you guys, and you can ask some of these. I'm going to go with this one from Tom. He asked, when it comes to challenges and achievements, what is the difference there? Let me see if I can answer that briefly, Tom. So when you think of a challenge is more of a manager-initiated game where the player with the best KPI total during the challenge period is rewarded points. And an achievement, think of it more like a badge or a certificate to reward consistent, optimal behavior. I know sometimes that can be confusing, but I think that can be pretty effective to use both, but they are used for slightly different concepts there. I like this question. Maybe let's get this question. When it comes to which metrics to track, we've got a question here. It looks like it's from Peter. And then John, I've got your question. We'll get there in just one second. So Peter, when it comes to which metrics should you be tracking, Peter, you want to be thinking about what persona you're actually dealing with here, because if I've got a very strategic rep, dials may not be the thing I want to get to. So I think the first step in deciding on which metrics, you want to know your personas and what's important to those personas. So closers is a high-level example. They're going to potentially care more about revenue and closing deals. Sales development reps, they're going to maybe care more about opportunities in pipeline. So that's number one. Number two, you then want to be getting into leading versus lagging indicators. Again, don't confuse gamification with just a general BI or reporting tool. Gamification should be focusing on the behaviors that lead to lagging indicators. So it is best to get leading indicators in there if you can. So think about obviously activities or proposals or opportunities created or conversations had. It's that type of stuff that leads to those things that you really want to be more effective. Great. So John, we'll reach out to you. John asks, who can help me get in contact to get some of these KPIs in Salesforce to show up in the leaderboards? So John's asking, and actually this is good. I'm glad you asked this, John, because a lot of people, not a lot. We've got one other question that said, can I only use KPIs that the InsideSales.com platform provides, or can I use KPIs from Salesforce? That's a question from Michael, and it's a good because it dovetails off of John's. So John, we'll get in touch with you about getting some of the KPIs from Salesforce into gamification. But Michael's question basically dovetails right off of it. You can do both, Michael. So you can certainly use just the inherent KPIs within the InsideSales.com platform. So that would be number of phone calls as an example. But you can also work with our team, set up a workflow to actually pull some other KPIs from Salesforce to get in there if you wanted to do, potentially number of deals closed as a potential example there. Good. What other questions do you have, you guys? Just maybe a couple more, and then we'll wrap this up. Again, if you want to continue the conversation, please, 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 I will be offended if you don't add me on LinkedIn. And this is Gabe Larson. And if you ever get bored, we run a great sales acceleration podcast that happens Tuesdays and Thursdays, where we talk about real problems, real people, real solutions all around the areas of demand generation, sales, and sales operations. Maybe let's handle this last question on thinking about points. I said we'd maybe get into this a little bit more. This is a question coming from, looked like it was Kevin. Kevin, we'll probably get a little more into this later, but when you think about point values, think about the weight that KPIs have based on the amount of effort needed to achieve them. So I'd say, for example, if your current ratios indicate that 50 calls are needed to create one qualified opportunity, then that's a great starting place. So calls maybe equal 1 point and qualified opportunities equal 50 points. Again, you can potentially play with that, but I like to think about actually aligning it with my process. Again, if I have my conversation rate is 10%, then I potentially use that as a basis to start thinking about my point system. I think that's a pretty strong way to do that. Again, we'll get a little bit more into that, maybe give you a couple examples in a later presentation, but hopefully that's helpful to get you started. Fantastic, you guys. Really interesting. Really appreciate the handful of conversations. Again, if you'd like to talk more with us about building a gamification strategy through Power Standings, make sure you tune in to future webinars as we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. But do feel free to reach out to a representative here at Inside Sales, or again, connect with me on LinkedIn. Would be happy to debate and discuss best practices with you. So with that, really appreciate your time, and I'll leave it there and say have a fantastic day.